Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of the most enigmatic figures in the Viking world, Floki Vilgerðarson. Some called him mad, others called him genius. But everyone agreed on one thing. Floki's ships weren't just made of wood and iron. They were crafted from the very breath of the gods. But why did Floki's ships never sink? Why did storms fear his vessels? Why did waves bow before them? Tonight, I'll share with you that secret no one else knows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you retuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. On the cold shores of Kattegat, in the early spring of 843, while everyone slept, a single light burned, Floki's shipyard. The air hung heavy with the mixture of wood shavings, tar, and a strange incense that no one could quite identify. The sounds coming from within ... Well, they weren't normal. Loki, my treacherous brother, Floki murmured, his chisel carving an intricate dragon head. Will you help me tonight? Or will you play your games with me again? Floki's eyes gleamed with an intensity that some would call madness. But his wife Helga knew better. This gleam was the mark of one who spoke with gods. Or at least, Floki believed he did. And in the Viking world, belief was everything. The workshop itself was unlike any other in Kattegat. While other shipbuilders kept their tools neatly arranged, Floki's space was chaos incarnate. Half-finished carvings littered every surface. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, and bundles of herbs hung from the rafters, their purposes known only to Floki himself. The gods speak in disorder, Floki would say when asked about the mess. Order is for small minds. Creation comes from chaos. This particular night was special. Ragnar Lothbrok had commissioned a new ship, not just any vessel, but one for a journey west, to lands no Viking had ever seen. And what Ragnar asked for wasn't an ordinary ship. Build me a ship that even the gods would envy, Ragnar had said. Floki had responded with that famous unsettling smile of his. Make the gods jealous? Now that's my kind of work. But Floki's method of shipbuilding was vastly different from other masters. First, there was the matter of choosing the right tree. Come with me, he would tell his apprentices on nights when the moon was full. They would venture into the forest, Floki carrying a peculiar instrument. Some whispered it was a gift from Loki himself, that would vibrate near the right tree. Do you hear it? Floki would say, pressing his ear against an oak's trunk. This tree wants to see the oceans. It wants to dance with the waves. The apprentices would exchange glances. They heard nothing, but the ships made from Floki's chosen trees truly did seem to dance upon the water, moving with a grace that defied explanation. The tree-choosing ritual was elaborate and precise. While normal shipbuilders would select trees based on size and straightness of grain, Floki looked for something else entirely. He would walk among the oaks for hours, sometimes days, touching each trunk, whispering to them, waiting for a response only he could perceive. Trees have memories, he explained once to young Bjorn Ironside. This one remembers a great storm. See how it leans? It learned to bend without breaking. That knowledge will serve a ship well. This other one, it grew straight and proud, never tested. It would make a rigid ship, one that fights the waves instead of dancing with them. When the right tree was found, the cutting ritual would begin. Normal craftsmen cut their trees at dawn. Floki? He waited for midnight, for the moment when the moon stood directly overhead. Trees sleep at night, he would explain. Cut while sleeping, and their spirit remains in the wood. It stays awake. It watches for dangers. Before swinging the first axe blow, Floki would kneel, pressing his forehead against the trunk. What he said in those moments, no one knew exactly, but an apprentice who once crept close enough to eavesdrop claimed to have heard. "Old friend, I will carry you to the oceans. I will turn your roots into waves. Your branches will catch the winds. But first, ... share your pain with me." And then came the strangest part. Floki would cut his left index finger and smear the blood on the tree's bark. "Blood bond," he'd say. "Now this tree and I are one. I feel its pain. It carries my strength." The cutting itself was ceremonial. Floki would sing as he worked, not the usual work songs of woodcutters, but something older, stranger. The words were in the old tongue, so ancient that even the eldest in the village couldn't translate them all. But fragments were understood, calls to the Norns, the weavers of fate, asking them to transfer the tree's word, its destiny, into the ship it would become. When the tree finally fell, Floki would lie beside it for a moment, his hand on its trunk. "Rest now," he would whisper. "Your second life begins soon." Once cut, normal shipbuilders would immediately begin processing the wood. But Floki, he waited. Exactly 9 days and 9 nights. During this time, the trunk would be kept in a special tent, protected from rain and sun alike. Each night, Floki would sit beside it, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, always present. "What do you do there?" Ragnar had asked once, finding Floki in the tent at midnight. "We converse," Floki had said simply. "The tree tells me its story, which storms it weathered, which birds it sheltered, where its roots found water. How can I build a proper ship without knowing these things?" The tent itself was adorned with strange items. Antlers hung from the support poles, their points carved with runes. Bowls of salt water sat at each corner. "So the wood can smell the sea, it will soon call home," Floki explained. Most mysteriously, mirrors of polished bronze were positioned around the trunk. "The tree must see itself transformed," Floki said when questioned about the mirrors. "It must witness its own becoming." During these 9 nights, Floki would also prepare the wood in ways other shipbuilders would consider madness. He would burn specific herbs and let the smoke seep into the grain. Mugwort for protection, yarrow for strength, and something else, something that made the smoke shimmer with an oily rainbow sheen. "What is that last herb?" an apprentice once dared to ask. Floki's eyes had glinted with mischief. "If I told you, it wouldn't work. Some secrets must remain secrets, or they lose their power." People thought Floki was mad until they saw his ships. Floki's vessels were different. Perhaps not faster, perhaps not larger, but they seemed ... alive. There was the incident with the ship called Wave Dancer. During a violent storm that forced all other vessels to seek harbor, Wave Dancer had remained at sea. The crew later swore that the ship had navigated itself through the towering waves, finding passages between them as if it could see the safe path. "It's impossible," said Thorstein, one of Ragnar's most experienced raiders. "I've sailed for 20 years. Ships don't think." "No," Floki had agreed, that unsettling smile playing on his lips. "But they remember. And sometimes remembering is better than thinking." The most critical moment in any ship's construction was the carving of the dragon head. Floki always did this work alone, in the darkest hours of the night. The shipyard doors would be barred, and strange sounds would emerge from within. Singing or praying or something else entirely. No one could say for certain. "The dragon head is the ship's soul," Floki would explain on the rare occasions he spoke of it. "Carved wrong, and the ship is blind. It will lose itself at sea." But Floki's dragon heads were different. Their eyes seemed to truly see. Some sailors swore that on foggy nights, the eyes would open and close of their own accord, scanning the waters ahead. The process of carving a dragon head would take Floki 3 full nights. He would neither eat nor sleep during this time, sustained only by a strange brew he prepared himself. A mixture of honey, herbs, and something that turned the liquid black as night. It helps me see as the dragon sees, he explained once to Helga, who had brought him food he refused to touch. To carve true eyes, I must first understand their vision. The tools Floki used for dragon carving were unlike any others in his workshop. Normal chisels and hammers wouldn't do. Where did you find these? An apprentice had asked, examining the strange implements with their worn wooden handles and blades that seemed to shimmer even in shadow. Floki's answer was typically cryptic. I didn't find them. They found me, in an old burial mound where 9 ravens had gathered. The tools were there, as if waiting. These tools bore peculiar markings, runes, but not any that could be read by even the most learned. Even Floki claimed not to know their meaning. No need to read them, he'd say. The hands know what to do. And indeed, when Floki worked with these tools, his hands moved as if guided by another will. Sometimes his eyes would close entirely, yet the chisel never missed its mark. The dragon heads that emerged were so lifelike that children would dare each other to touch them, fearing they might bite. One night, during a full moon, Floki was working on a particularly special dragon head. Helga had crept into the workshop. She was worried, as Floki hadn't come home in 3 days. What she saw froze her in place. Around Floki, on the floor, a circle had been drawn with strange symbols. Incense burned at 5 points around the circle. Amber, pine resin, and something else. Something that produced a sharp scent Helga couldn't identify. And Floki Floki was speaking in a voice not his own. Deep, resonant, ancient. 9 worlds I have seen, 9 seas I have crossed. Let these eyes see Jormungandr. Let these teeth bite the storms. Helga wanted to retreat, but Floki suddenly turned. His eyes ... they were different. Brighter, wilder, older somehow. Helga, he said, his voice returning to normal. Perfect timing. The gods sent you. Floki, you're... Listen, Floki said, reaching out his hand. This ship is special. More special than what Ragnar asked for. This ship will take us to new lands. Lands covered in ice, with mountains that breathe fire. Helga shivered. Floki's prophecies always came true. But there's a price, Floki continued. Every great journey demands one. That's why ... He paused, looking at the dragon head. That's why I'll weave a lock of your hair into it, and mine, so the ship knows us, protects us. This was a tradition Floki followed with every ship, giving it family. Sometimes his own blood, sometimes hair from loved ones, sometimes, for the most special ships, his own tears. Tears? Bjorn Ironside had asked once. Warriors don't cry. We cry for the gods, Floki had said. From joy, from sorrow, from longing. Every tear is a prayer. And prayers keep ships afloat. The dragon head Floki carved that night was unlike any other. Its expression held both ferocity and wisdom, threat and promise. The scales were so detailed that they seemed to shift in changing light. The teeth were individually carved, each one sharp enough to draw blood if touched carelessly. But it was the eyes that truly set it apart. Floki had inlaid them with stones he'd found on a distant beach. Not precious gems, but simple rocks that had been polished by countless tides. The sea gave me these, he explained. Now they returned to it, but as eyes that know its ways. When the ship's skeleton was complete, it was time for the most important ritual, the ship's soul ceremony. Floki always performed this rite on the new moon. New moon, new beginnings, he would say. The entire village would gather, but this was no ordinary ceremony. Floki would first light a fire, but not just any fire. He would use wood from 9 different trees. Oak for strength, ash to represent Yggdrasil, birch for purification, pine for the journey, beech for wisdom willow, for flexibility, yew for protection, juniper for blessing, apple wood for prosperity, As each piece of wood was added to the fire, Floki would trace a rune in the air. The crowd would watch in absolute silence. Even children knew not to speak. Everyone understood that a word spoken at the wrong moment might frighten away the ship as spirit. The preparation for this ceremony would begin days in advance. Floki would fast, drinking only water mixed with honey and sacred herbs. He would spend hours in meditation, sitting within the empty hull of the ship, listening to what he called the wood's dreams. Every ship dreams before it wakes, he explained to his daughter Angrboda years later. In those dreams, it sees all its possible futures. Glorious voyages, terrible storms, peaceful harbors, violent battles. My job is to guide it toward the best dreams, away from the nightmares. When the fire reached its peak, Floki would raise a special drinking horn. What it contained, only he knew for certain. Some said mead mixed with honey. Others claimed blood. Still others insisted it was the very drink of the gods themselves. "Njord, Lord of the Seas," Floki would cry out, "carry this ship upon your waters. Let the waves be its friends. Let the winds be its brothers." He would take a sip, then pour the rest over the ship's prow. "Ran, Lady of the Depths, let not your nets catch this vessel. Draw not its crew into the deeps." Another sip, this time poured over the stern. "Thor, Lord of Thunder, let your hammer keep storms from this ship, or if storms must come." Floki's famous smile would appear. Let this ship know how to dance with them. But the ceremony's climax was yet to come. Floki would climb into the ship and stand at its center. He would close his eyes and spread his arms wide. The wind would suddenly rise, making the fire's flames dance wildly. Floki's lips would move, but no one could hear what he said. Some claimed Floki spoke with Loki himself in those moments. Others believed he whispered to Odin. But Helga knew the truth. Floki was speaking to the ship's spirit, telling it its name, its secret name that no one else would ever know. According to Floki, every ship had two names. One that everyone knew, Sea Serpent, Storm Runner, Wave Dancer. The other was the hidden name, known only to the ship and its maker. This name would be whispered in storms, called upon when lost. One time, a young warrior had scoffed. "Do you really believe in this secret name nonsense?" The next voyage, that warrior had fallen overboard, nearly drowning when a plank appeared beside him. A piece of the ship's rail, broken off. It bore strange markings. Floki had seen it and smiled. "The ship recognized you. Did you whisper its secret name beneath the waters?" The warrior had nodded. Yes, he had whispered it. He didn't know how he knew it, but somehow, in that moment of desperation, the name had come to him. "You see," Floki had said, addressing his apprentices, "the ship chooses who knows its true name. Usually only in great need. It's not magic, it's trust." The ship trusted him enough to save him. Perhaps Floki's most famous ship was 3 ravens. The ritual he performed while building this vessel is still spoken of in whispers and wonder. Floki kept 3 ravens, Huginn and Muninn, named after Odin's ravens, and Rafn, his own special bird. He had found them as chicks and raised them, but these were no ordinary ravens. "How did you train them?" Everyone would ask. "I didn't train them," Floki would say. "We came to an understanding." The ravens lived freely, coming and going as they pleased, but they always returned to Floki. They would perch on his shoulders while he worked, their black eyes watching every movement of his tools. Sometimes they would caw at specific moments, and Floki would pause, nod, and change what he was doing. "They see things I miss," he explained. "Ravens fly between worlds. They see the ship not just as it is, but as it will be." When building 3 ravens, Floki had sent each bird in a different direction. Huginn to the east, Muninn to the west, Rafn to the north. "Go and bring me news," he had said. "Tell me which way this ship should sail." 3 days later, the ravens had returned. Each carried something in its beak. Huginn brought a green leaf, fertile lands to the east. Muninn brought a white stone, unknown islands to the west. Rafn brought a piece of ice, undiscovered lands to the north. Floki buried these items in 3 different parts of the ship. Now the ship knows its paths, he said. The ravens were more than messengers. They were Floki's connection to the divine realm. He would often be seen in deep conversation with them, and while others heard only cawing, Floki seemed to understand every sound. Rafn tells me the wind will change tomorrow, he would announce, and sure enough, it would. Huginn saw storm clouds gathering 3 days north, he would warn, allowing ships to alter their course. Muninn brings word from the gods, he would sometimes say, his expression growing distant. Changes are coming. Great changes. The relationship between Floki and his ravens went beyond the practical. There was a spiritual element that even Helga didn't fully understand. Sometimes, late at night, she would find Floki in the yard, all 3 ravens perched around him, and he would be completely still, eyes closed, breathing so slowly he seemed almost dead. "Where do you go?" she asked him once, after he'd spent 3 hours in this trance-like state. "I fly with them," Floki had answered simply. "I see through their eyes. The world is different from above, Helga. You can see the patterns where the currents flow, where the winds are born, where the land meets the sea in hidden places." And indeed, during the voyage in 3 ravens, when fog so thick descended that even the sun was invisible, the ship had seemed to navigate itself. The crew had panicked, but Floki sat calmly at the center of the deck, smiling. "Don't worry," he'd said. "The ravens are showing the way." And when the fog cleared, green lands had appeared before them. They had reached Ireland, exactly where they'd intended, despite sailing blind for 2 days. But Floki's greatest secret was what he did on the final night before a ship was launched. He would spend the entire night alone with the vessel. What happened during those hours, no one knew for certain. By morning, the ship would be ... different. Same wood, same sails, same construction, but something had been added. A presence, a feeling, an awareness. Helga had once succumbed to curiosity and spied on him. She saw Floki walking through the ship, touching every plank, whispering to each beam. But strangest of all, she watched as Floki drew small symbols in the ship's hidden corners. Not with blood, but with something else. As Helga crept closer, she understood. Floki was drawing with his own tears. "Every ship is a child," Floki had said, somehow knowing she was there. "And when every child leaves, a piece of you goes with them." But there was more to these final night rituals than even Helga had seen. Floki would bring specific items aboard, placing them in careful locations throughout the ship. A small iron hammer beneath the prow, representing Thor's protection. A branch he claimed was from Yggdrasil itself at the base of the mast. A miniature spear beside the rudder, symbolizing Odin's guidance. And in the ship's hold, pouches of earth from 9 different sacred sites. Why earth? Ragnar had asked when he discovered them. Ships travel on water, Floki had explained, but without earth, they forget where they're going. This soil reminds them of home, shows them the way back. The most mysterious element of the final night ritual was what Floki called the awakening. He would sit in the exact center of the ship, place his hands on the deck, and begin to hum, a low, thrumming sound that seemed to resonate through the wood itself. He would continue this for hours, the sound rising and falling like waves, like wind, like the very breathing of the sea. Those who had passed by the shipyard on such nights swore they heard 2 voices, Floki some and something else, something that seemed to come from the ship itself, harmonizing with its maker. "I'm teaching it to sing," Floki explained once, when asked about the strange sounds. "Every ship has a song. On calm seas, it hums contentedly. In storms, it roars its defiance. A ship that knows its song will never be truly lost." The day had come for the Iceland expedition. Floki's greatest ship, God's Whisper, stood ready. The preparations Floki had made for this vessel had already become legend. First, he had brought his 3 ravens aboard. "They are my eyes," he'd said. "When land appears, they'll tell us." Then he had placed strange objects in every corner of the ship. Beneath the prow, a small iron hammer to represent Thor's protection. At the base of the mast, a branch he claimed was from Yggdrasil itself. Beside the rudder, a miniature spear symbolizing Odin's guidance. In the ship's hold, pouches of earth from 9 different locations. But God's Whisper held more secrets than even Floki's usual ships. For this vessel, he had incorporated elements no other shipbuilder would dare to use. The keel was made from a single massive oak that had been struck by lightning 3 times yet survived. Thor tested this tree and found it worthy, Floki had declared. The sails were woven with special thread, not just ordinary flax, but mixed with hair from every family in Kattegat who would send a member on the voyage. The ship carries not just bodies, but the hopes of all who stay behind, Floki explained. This way, their prayers travel with us. Most remarkably, Floki had embedded crystals throughout the ship's structure. Not precious gems, but specific stones he'd gathered over years. Sunstones for navigation, even in fog. Black obsidian from distant volcanoes, to recognize the fire mountains when we find them. And most mysteriously, ordinary-looking rocks from beaches all around the known world. Every shore has its own song, Floki said when questioned about these common stones. The ship needs to know many songs to find the one that doesn't yet exist in its memory, the song of the undiscovered land. When departure day arrived, the entire village had gathered at the shore. Floki performed his final ritual, the first boarding ceremony. But Floki didn't board immediately. First, he knelt, pressing his forehead against the ship's hull. He remained that way for so long that people began to whisper nervously. Some said he was praying, others that he was listening. Finally, he rose, turning to the crowd with his famous smile. "The ship is ready. The gods are ready. But are you?" When he took his first step aboard, he used his left foot. "Left foot brings luck," he always said. "Right foot goes to war. Left foot comes home." As he took his position, the wind suddenly rose. The sails billowed. The ravens cawed in unison. "See," said Floki, moving to the helm. "Even the gods are coming with us." But before they could depart, Floki performed one more ritual, one that he had never done before. He called for a bronze bowl and filled it with seawater. Then, to everyone's amazement, he added drops of his own blood, 3 raven feathers, and a handful of the sacred earth from the ship's hold. "This is new," Ragnar commented, watching with interest. "New journeys require new magic," Floki replied. He stirred the mixture with his finger, then walked to the prow of the ship. There, he dipped his hand in the bowl and began to paint symbols on the dragon head. Not runes anyone recognized, but flowing curved lines that seemed to shift and change even as he drew them. "What are those?" asked Thorstein. "The language of the sea," Floki answered. "Older than runes, older than words. The first sailors knew it, before they forgot how to listen. I'm reminding the ship how to speak it." As the ship left the harbor, Helga stood on the shore watching. She remembered Floki's words from the night before. "This journey will be different. Helga, we'll see a land covered in ice, with mountains that breathe fire. Lands where even the gods haven't walked." And there, he had paused, his eyes focusing on something beyond the physical world. "There we will build a new world." Helga placed her hand on her belly. She hadn't told Floki yet she was pregnant. Perhaps she would tell him when he returned. Perhaps their child would be born in those new lands. As the ship diminished on the horizon, a crowd began to disperse. But the old Valva, Mother Ingvar, remained. "What do you see?" Helga had asked. The old woman shook her head slowly. Floki's ships don't just carry people. They carry fates. And this ship ... double quotes. She paused. This ship carries a world. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Floki's ship, God's Whisper, progressed through the violent waters of the North Sea. While other ships struggled, God's Whisper seemed to glide over the surface. "This isn't normal," one of the crew had muttered. "Other ships are eating waves. Ours walks on them." Floki stood at the helm, smiling as always. Sometimes his lips would move, as if conversing with someone unseen. The crew had grown accustomed to it. Floki had his invisible friends. During the journey, Floki demonstrated why his preparation had been so meticulous. When fog descended so thick that day became night, Floki brought out the sunstones. He held one high, turning it slowly, and even through the impenetrable mist, a faint glow appeared in the crystal. "There," he said, pointing. "That's where the sun hides. Now we know our direction." When supplies ran low, the ravens proved their worth beyond mere scouting. They would disappear for hours, then return, circling the ship in specific patterns. Floki would watch them, nod, and order course changes. Always within a day, they would find small islands with fresh water, or schools of fish would surface near the ship. "How do they know?" a young warrior asked. "They see what we cannot," Floki replied. "Time moves differently for those who fly. They see not just what is, but what will be." One night, a terrible storm arose. Waves towered like mountains. Wind shrieked like the voices of the drowned. Other ships in their small fleet were crying out in the darkness. "Floki!" Ragnar shouted over the howling wind. "We need to lower the sails." But Floki shook his head. "No, the ship knows what to do." At that moment, something incredible happened. The three ravens, Huginn, Muninn, and Rafn, took flight into the heart of the storm. No normal birds could fly in such weather, but they danced with the wind as if it were a gentle breeze. "Watch them," Floki cried. "They're showing us the way." Indeed, the ravens flew ahead of the ship, seeming to create a corridor through the storm. God's Whisper followed that path. Waves crashed on either side, but couldn't touch the vessel. When morning came, the storm had passed. The crew looked at each other in amazement. The ship hadn't taken a single significant damage. "How?" asked a young warrior. Floki shrugged. "Trust the ship. It knows more than you." But the storm had revealed something else. During the worst of it, when lightning had illuminated the sky, several crew members swore they saw something impossible. The dragonhead had turned, scanning the waters, its eyes glowing with an inner fire. "I told you the head was alive," one whispered to another. "Not alive," Floki corrected, having overheard. "Awake. There's a difference. Living things die. Awakened things. They transcend death." Days later, strange clouds appeared on the horizon. Not normal clouds, red and black, as if the sky itself was burning. "Fire," said Floki, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "The gods' fire." As they drew closer, the crew's fear grew. There was indeed an island ahead, and mountains of fire were erupting from it. Lava flowed into the sea, creating massive clouds of steam. "We should turn back," someone shouted. "This is Surtur's realm, the end of the world," but Floki laughed. "No, this is the beginning, where fire meets ice." Just as it was at the world's creation, he released the ravens. All three flew toward the island and disappeared. Hours later they returned, and Rafn carried a green branch in his beak. "Life," Floki whispered. "Life in the heart of fire." As they approached the island, they saw that indeed, at the feet of the fire-breathing mountains, there were green valleys. Hot springs sent up steam, and the soil looked rich and fertile. "Behold," said Floki, spreading his arms, "the gods' gift to us. Fire makes the soil fertile. Ice keeps the water fresh. Here." He stopped. His eyes suddenly closed. The crew watched anxiously. They knew Floki's trance states. Floki's lips began moving rapidly, but the voice that emerged wasn't his own. It was deeper, more ancient. 9 worlds I have seen, 9 seas I have crossed, where fire kisses ice. A new world shall be built. Old gods shall depart, new gods shall arrive. But the land will remember Floki's ships, Floki's prayers. Floki staggered. Ragnar caught him. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with tears. "What did you see?" Ragnar asked. "The future," Floki whispered. 1,000 years hence. People will live here. Our children's children's children. And ... His voice trembled. The old gods will be forgotten. Another god will come. The crucified god, the crew grumbled. They had no love for the Christian deity. But, Floki continued, his smile returning, our story will live. In every shipbuilder, in every sailor. The gods may leave, but the sea remains. And the sea remembers. This prophecy would prove more accurate than anyone could have imagined. But in that moment, standing on the deck of God's Whisper, looking at the impossible island of fire and ice, the crew was focused only on the immediate wonder before them. "How do we land safely?" Thorstein asked, eyeing the boiling waters where lava met sea. Floki's answer was to walk to the prow and place his hand on the dragon head. He whispered something, that secret name perhaps, and then pointed to the east. There, the dragon sees a safe harbor. They sailed eastward along the coast, and indeed, they found a perfect natural harbor, protected from the volcanic activity, but close enough to benefit from the rich soil it created. When they made landfall, Floki's first action was to take the 9 pouches of earth from the ship and mix them with the new land soil. "Now this earth is ours too," he said, "and we are its." That night, after they'd established their first camp, Floki built a great fire. 9 different types of wood, all from the new land. They gathered around it. "This island is a gift," Floki said, "but not a free one. To live here means to dance with fire and ice. It won't be easy." Ragnar nodded. "We didn't ask for easy." Floki laughed. "Good, because tomorrow we build our first house. And I'll teach you how to speak this land's language, how to befriend fire, how to ... double quotes." He stopped. The 3 ravens had settled on his shoulders, seeming to whisper in his ears. "What do they say?" Someone asked. Floki's face grew serious. "They say winter is coming, but such a winter, the sun won't show itself for months. We must prepare." The following days were filled with frantic activity. Floki taught everyone how to build in this volcanic soil, how to use the hot springs, how to protect against the wind. "This island is alive," he kept saying. "It breathes, it moves. Don't fight it, dance with it." And indeed, houses built with Floki's techniques withstood the wind and earth tremors. The hot springs warmed their homes. The volcanic soil proved incredibly fertile. But Floki's greatest innovation was how he adapted his shipbuilding knowledge to land structures. He built houses like he built ships, flexible, able to move with the earth rather than resist it. He positioned buildings like a fleet, each protecting the others from wind. He even carved protective symbols, similar to those on his dragon heads, above each doorway. "A house is just a ship that sails on land," he explained to confused onlookers. "It needs the same things: strength, flexibility, and most importantly, a soul." Yes, Floki performed house-blessing rituals similar to his ship ceremonies. He would place specific items in the foundations. A piece of iron for strength, ash wood for connection to Yggdrasil, and always, always, a small amount of earth from their homeland. "So the house remembers where we came from," he said. "Memory is what makes a house a home." Months passed. The small settlement grew. Floki began building new ships from Icelandic timber. "These trees are different," he said. "Stronger. They've grown with fire. One day, News came from Norway. Helga had arrived on another ship. She was heavily pregnant. When Floki saw her, he fell to his knees. The gods, he whispered, their greatest gift. That night, Helga went into labor. It was a difficult birth. Floki stood outside, staring at the stars. The three ravens sat silently beside him. Loki, he whispered, I know you sometimes play games, but tonight I want no games. Just ... A baby's cry pierced the night. Floki's face lit up. He rushed inside. A girl. Helga said, exhausted but happy. Name her. Floki took the baby in his arms. The little girl opened her eyes, bright, curious eyes like Floki's own. Angroda, said Floki, bringer of the future. Isn't that the name of Loki's wife? Helga asked. Floki smiled. Yes, and she too brought change. Like our daughter Will. She's the first Viking born in Iceland, the first child of a new world. But Floki's pronouncement carried more weight than even he realized. Angroda would grow up between two worlds, the old ways her parents brought from Norway and the new land that shaped her from birth. She would learn shipbuilding from her father, but also something more, how to read the land itself, how to predict the island's moods, how to build not just ships, but communities that could withstand anything. Floki made a special cradle for his daughter, carved like a miniature ship, complete with a tiny dragon head. So she learns to sail even in her dreams, he explained. As Angroda grew, she showed signs of inheriting more than just her father's crafting skills. She would talk to the ravens as he did, and more remarkably, they seemed to respond. She could predict weather changes by watching the steam patterns from hot springs. Most unnervingly for some, she would sometimes speak of things before they happened. Nothing major, just small things like Uncle Ragnar will visit tomorrow, when no one had seen ships on the horizon. She has the sight, Mother Ingvar declared when she finally made the journey to Iceland. But different from the old sight, this is something new. The land has claimed her. Years passed. Iceland's settlement grew and thrived. Floki aged, but continued building ships. Each one was more special than the last. As he worked, he began teaching not just shipbuilding, but the philosophy behind it. Apprentices came from all over the settlement, and Floki would share his wisdom, though always keeping certain secrets. A ship is not just wood and nails, he would lecture, his hands never stopping their work. It's a living thing. Treat it as such. Speak to it. Listen to it. Most importantly, give it purpose. He taught them the importance of rituals, but also adaptation. The gods gave us traditions, he said, but they also gave us minds. What worked in Norway might not work here. The land is different, the trees are different, even the sea is different. Learn the old ways, yes, but let them grow and change. This philosophy extended beyond shipbuilding. Floki became a leader in adapting Viking culture to their new home. He incorporated the island's volcanic nature into their religious practices. The hot springs became sacred sites for cleansing rituals. The lava fields were seen as places where the earth's blood had spilled, making them powerful locations for oaths and promises. We're not just Vikings anymore, Floki declared during one gathering. We're Icelanders. The fire and ice have entered our blood. He even adapted the runes, adding new symbols inspired by the island's unique features. One for geothermal heat, another for volcanic ash, a third for the midnight sun. These new runes began appearing on ships, houses, and eventually in the growing body of Icelandic written lore. When building his final ship, he called it Time Traveler. Floki was very old. His hands trembled, but his spirit remained sharp. Father, said Angroboda, now a young woman, you should rest. One more ship, said Floki. My last ship? But this one will be different. How different? Floki smiled. This ship will travel to the future. Not physically, but its spirit. Its spirit will journey through time. 1,000 years from now, when someone builds a ship, this ship's spirit will be there. No one understood what he meant. Until after Floki died, they launched Time Traveler into the sea. They were going to use it for Floki's funeral, the old tradition, burning the ship to send the deceased to the afterlife. But the ship wouldn't burn. They tried repeatedly. Torches went out. Flaming arrows turned back. The ship seemed to repel fire itself. "The ship doesn't want to burn," said old Ragnar. Finally, they let it be. The ship drifted on its own, disappearing into the horizon. But the story doesn't end there. In the years that followed, fishermen would report strange sightings. On foggy nights, they claimed to see a ship with a dragon prow sailing past. Not a ghost ship, but something else. More like a memory given form. The ship would appear to those in need, guiding them through storms or away from dangerous waters. Vengroda, inheriting her father's workshop, continued the shipbuilding tradition, but added her own innovations. She had learned from her father that the craft must evolve. She began incorporating designs that worked specifically with Iceland's unique conditions, hulls shaped to handle both ice and volcanic debris, flexibility to withstand earth tremors, even while docked. More importantly, she preserved and passed on Floki's rituals, though she too adapted them. The blood bonding with trees remained, but she added a ritual of bonding with the fire, passing each plank through sacred smoke from volcanic vents. "Fire and ice shaped this land," she would say. "Our ships must know both." Centuries passed. Iceland remained home to Viking descendants. The old gods were forgotten, replaced by the crucified god Floki had foreseen. But every shipbuilder, when starting work, would perform a strange ritual. They would cut their left hand and let blood drop onto the wood. They didn't know why. "Our ancestors did it this way," they'd say. On stormy nights, some sailors swore they saw a dragon-headed ship on the horizon. Not a ghost, more like a memory, a whisper. And in Iceland's volcanic soil, when the wind blew just right, some still heard. Though gods may leave, the sea remains. The sea remembers. Floki's ships, Floki's prayers. Even in modern Iceland, shipbuilders maintain certain traditions. Boarding with the left foot first, giving ships secret names, sprinkling seawater on the prow. They don't know why, but Floki knew, because he wasn't just building ships. He was building the future. Every plank, every nail, carried his spirit. And spirits don't die. Today, in Iceland's fjords, when fog descends, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the calling of 3 ravens, the sound of wood being carved, and Floki's laughter. Because some people continue to live even after death. In the work they've done, the traces they've left, the prayers they've taught. Floki was such a person. Viking shipwright. Madman who spoke with gods. Builder of the future. And perhaps, somewhere out there still, building a new ship. Not for the gods, for us. To help us remember the eternal song of the sea, the ancient dance of wind, and the art of a craftsman breathing life into wood. But there's more to Floki's story, parts that were never written down, only whispered from parent to child through generations of Icelandic shipbuilders. They say that on certain nights, when the northern lights dance particularly bright, you can see them, not just random patterns of light, but the outline of a great ship sailing across the sky. Its dragon head turns, scanning the heavens, and for those who know how to look, you can see 3 ravens flying alongside it. Floki's still sailing, the old fishermen say. Just in different waters now. There are the stones too, scattered across Iceland's beaches, ordinary-looking rocks with strange markings. Not quite runes, not quite pictures, but something in between. Shipbuilders know to collect these stones. They don't know why, but having one in your workshop brings good fortune. Ships built near these stones seem stronger, sail truer, weather storms better. Angroda, before her own death, left behind writings not about shipbuilding techniques, but about her father's philosophy. Hidden in these texts are hints about the deeper mysteries. Father always said the secret wasn't in the building, but in the becoming. A ship must become what it was meant to be, not what we force it to be. The wood remembers being a tree. Our job is to help it remember how to be a ship without forgetting it was once rooted to the earth. She wrote of the night rituals in more detail than Floki ever shared. On the final night, Father didn't just mark the ship with tears. He gave it memories, his own memories. Every storm he'd survived, every calm sea he'd sailed, every star he'd navigated by. A ship without memory, he'd say, is like a person without dreams. It can function, but it cannot truly live. Most remarkably, she revealed the true nature of the tools Floki used for dragon carving. The tools chose their own successors. When Father grew old, he didn't pass them to me. He brought them to the workshop and set them on the bench. They'll decide, he said. The next morning, young Thorstein found them in his hands when he woke. He had no memory of taking them, but from that day forward, his dragon heads carried the same life as Father's. This tradition continued for generations. The tools would vanish from one workshop and appear in another, always finding hands that could use them properly. Some said the tools were cursed, others said blessed. The truth, as Floki would have said, was probably both. Even now, in the 21st century, Icelandic shipbuilders report strange experiences. Electronic equipment malfunctions in certain workshops, always the oldest ones, the ones that trace their lineage back to the settlement age. But the malfunction is specific. GPS systems occasionally point not to true north, but to seemingly random directions. When followed, these directions always lead to either good fishing grounds or safe harbors. Marine biologists studying the waters around Iceland have documented an unusual phenomenon. Certain pods of whales seem to follow shipping routes that make no logical sense, until they recompared with ancient Viking sailing paths. It's as if the whales remember routes taken by ships 1,000 years ago. The sea remembers, as Floki said. There's a woodworker in Reykjavik, old Magnus Thorson, who claims to be a direct descendant of Floki. He builds boats the old way, refusing modern power tools for the crucial parts. His workshop smells of pine tar and sawdust, and in the rafters, 3 ravens nest. They're wild birds, he insists, but they never leave. Sometimes, Magnus says, his hands never pausing in their work. I hear him. Not words, exactly. More like dot-dot suggestions. Angle the prow a bit more. That plank wants to be part of the hull, not the deck. Small things, and I listen. His boats are sought after throughout Iceland. Fishermen swear they're lucky. Scientists can't explain why boats built to Magnus' specifications seem to use 20% less fuel than identical modern designs. Magnus just smiles and says, the boats know how to work with the water, not against it. In the National Museum of Iceland, there's a small collection of wood fragments, each preserved in climate-controlled cases. They're labeled simply as ship fragments, circa 850 to 900 CE. But curators whisper about the strange properties these pieces exhibit. On certain days, no one can predict which, the wood seems to warm slightly. Security cameras have captured what appears to be condensation forming on the inside of the cases, but always in patterns. Almost like runes. One fragment in particular, a piece of what was once a dragon head, is the subject of numerous studies. Under microscopic examination, the wood grain contains trace elements not found in any tree native to Scandinavia or Iceland. Some speculate it came from driftwood, aged in the sea for decades before Floki found and carved it. Others wonder if the unusual composition is what allowed Floki's dragons to see. Dr. Astrid Johanstetter, leading researcher in archaeological maritime studies at the University of Iceland, has a different theory. We're looking at this wrong. We keep trying to find what Floki added to the wood. But what if the secret was what he took away? What if his carving method removed everything that wasn't essential, leaving only the how do I put this scientifically, the intention of the thing? Her theory is supported by analysis of the tool marks. They follow patterns that modern woodworkers describe as impossible, cuts that seem to go against the wood grain, yet never splinter, curves that should weaken the structure, but somehow strengthen it. So Floki's story ends as it began, with mystery, with whispers of something beyond the ordinary world. Or perhaps it never ends at all, because every ship built contains an echo of Floki's work. Every sailor who trusts their vessel in a storm continues his faith. Every craftsman who listens to their materials, instead of imposing their will, carries on his methods. In the end, Floki achieved what the gods themselves couldn't: true immortality. Not in some distant hall of the slain, but here, in the living world, in the creak of timber and the snap of sails, in the courage of those who dare the deep waters, and the skill of those who build their vessels. The old prayer, spoken by Icelandic sailors for generations, perhaps says it best: may your keel stay true. As Floki's trees stayed tall, may your sails stay full. As Floki's faith stayed strong, may you find your harbor, as Floki found his fate. And may the sea remember you, as it remembers those who came before. Sweet dreams, dear listener. And remember, when you wake tomorrow and look at the sea, perhaps you too will see it. A dragon head on the horizon, and hear it. Laughter in the wind, Floki's laughter. Because some stories don't end. They just ... continue, forever and ever. Into the mist of time, sailing still.